Hey everyone, and welcome back to another news alert. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and thank you so much for tuning into Boyd News. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more updates like this. And feel free to support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Links are in the description below the video. Alright, so I'm back with another update regarding the US peace proposal that has been delivered to Ukraine and Russia. We heard earlier today that Ukraine and Europe had jointly rejected the current peace deal. And now we have new information coming out that Europe and Ukraine are currently working on new framework for a counter proposal offer to hand to the United States. Let's take a look at this new story on your screen. Europe and Ukraine start work on a joint counter proposal peace deal. Ukraine is working on a counter proposal to the US peace plan with Britain, France, and Germany. The Europeans have not been briefed on the US plan and have shown strong support for Kyiv. So this information is breaking today on mainstream news outlet Reuters, and I'm going to show you more details on this. So we heard earlier today that Ukraine and Europe had both jointly rejected the U.S. peace plan for Ukraine, as we know it heavily will benefit Russia and actually put Ukraine in a very horrible position where they could be attacked in the future by Russia again. So apparently they're going to be coming out with some sort of amendments and their own proposal back to the United States. And I'm thinking that probably by next week we will not see Ukraine and Russia be signing any kind of peace deal, but we'll have to see how things play out here. We're also going to discuss Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's recent statements that he made to the Ukrainian people today, claiming that Ukraine is in a very difficult spot right now. They risk either giving up their dignity and freedom by surrendering to Russia or possibly losing a major ally, the United States, that has everything to do with this peace plan right now, because we heard earlier today, also being reported from Reuters, that if Ukraine does not sign this peace deal by Thanksgiving next week, that the U.S. will withdraw all support for Ukraine. That includes all weaponry and sharing military intelligence. On top of this news, we'll have information over on X from independent sources regarding a potential peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. Major statements have come out from European leaders, and other mainstream news outlets have shared new details regarding the U.S. peace plan. So we've got a lot to share with you with this update today. Let's go ahead and jump into this. We're going to hop on over to a mainstream news report. This is on Yahoo News, and they're citing Reuters today. So we're not going to go over this entire article. I'm just going to show you guys a brief portion of it and the fact that it talks about Ukraine, along with European allies, starting the work on a joint counter proposal to the United States with this peace deal. So it says here, Ukraine faces difficult choice as Trump demands acceptance of peace plan. This coming out today on Friday, November 21st, 2025. The information reads here, President Volodymyr Zelensky warned on Friday that Ukraine risked losing its dignity and freedom or Washington's backing over a U.S. peace plan that endorses key Russian demands. A proposal Donald Trump said Kyiv should accept within a week. U.S. President told Fox News Radio he believed Thursday was an appropriate deadline for Kyiv to accept the plan, confirming what two sources told Reuters. Washington's 28-point plan calls on Ukraine to cede territory, accept limits to its military, and renounce ambitions to join NATO. It also contains some proposals Moscow may object to and requires its forces to pull back from some areas they have captured, according to a draft seen by Reuters. Russia's President Vladimir Putin, who has previously refused to budge on Russia's key territorial and security demands, said on Friday that the U.S. plan could be the basis of a final resolution of the nearly four-year-old conflict. He said Kyiv was against the plan, but neither nor its European allies understood the reality of Russian advances in Ukraine. Yeah, Vladimir Putin was claiming that the Russians are taking over key cities on the eastern side of Ukraine. He also mentioned today, while he was holding a meeting with the National Security Council out of the Kremlin, that allegedly the Russians have received their version of this U.S. peace plan for Ukraine, and he did not basically say that they were going to agree to it. All he said was that they kind of agreed to it in principle or the general outline of it, but he did not say they were going to sign it. So far, neither Ukraine or Russia have agreed to this. Now it says Zelensky, who has rejected the plan's terms in the past as capitulation, appealed to Ukrainians for unity and said he would never betray Ukraine. He says, quote, "Now is one of the most difficult moments of our history," he said in a solemn speech to the nation delivered in the street outside his office, a location he uses only rarely for major addresses. Now Ukraine can face a very difficult choice, either losing dignity or risk losing a major partner, he said, adding, I will fight 24/7 to ensure that at least 2 points in the plan are not overlooked: the dignity and freedom of Ukrainians. Two sources told Reuters Washington had threatened to cut off intelligence sharing and weapons supplies to Ukraine if it does not accept the deal. They spoke on condition of anonymity to disclose the contents of private meetings. The White House did not immediately respond to requests for comment. However, a senior U.S. official later said it was not accurate to say the U.S. threatened to withhold intelligence. I thought that was interesting also, that I wonder who this senior U.S. official said, or who it was that said this, that they said it was not accurate that the U.S. would actually withhold that intelligence. So we'll see what the U.S. actually decides to do, but that's what that senior U.S. White House official had stated here. So in regards to Ukraine either making a decision here, right? So do they accept this peace plan, or do they risk losing the U.S. as an ally? And do you think the U.S. would actually back out? With everything the U.S. has done all the way up to this point to support Ukraine, are they actually willing to just back away from this and let Ukraine lose this fight? Obviously, the U.S. is a major ally to Ukraine. Now, could Ukraine continue the fighting with just support of the European Union? Now, that's a big question, too. A lot of people say that maybe it's possible, maybe not, but obviously the U.S. is very important to Ukraine, especially with intelligence. So let me know what you think is going to happen here in this situation. Are we going to see a counter proposal come out next week? And then maybe the U.S. will review it, and then it'll continue from there? Or is Trump going to stick to his deadline and say, if you don't sign this by Thursday of next week on Thanksgiving, we're going to take away intelligence and weapons for your nation? He also warned earlier today that Ukraine would begin to start losing ground very quickly. That could possibly be when he withdraws support for Ukraine. Finally, I want to show you this here down below. It says 3 sources told Reuters Ukraine was working on a counter proposal to the 28 plan with Britain, France, and Germany. The Europeans have not been consulted on the U.S. plan and have expressed strong support for Kyiv. We all want this war to end, but how it ends matters. Russia has no legal right whatsoever to any concessions from the country it invaded, said the EU foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas. This is a very dangerous moment for all. I have to agree with Kaja Kallas here. Yes, that's great that Ukraine's working on this counter proposal, but the original proposal from the United States forces Ukraine to make major concessions over to Russia, and Russia is the country, the aggressor that invaded Ukraine and attacked them, yet everything is being rewarded directly over to Russia with that peace plan. So we'll have to see what comes from the Ukraine and also Europe here very soon as they start to work on this counter proposal. Let's jump on over to X now. I got a couple things I want to share you over here as well. Max 25, Merz spoke with Trump about the plan for Ukraine, says German government spokesman. It was a confidential and constructive telephone conversation, he said. Further consultations at the level of advisors were agreed with Trump. Okay, so apparently there was a good conversation between Germany and the United States. We heard that Merz was going to speak to Trump, and they were going to be taking the lead in pushing forward with this counter proposal. Okay, so Germany is going to be trying to make some amendments to the current U.S. peace plan to make sure that it benefits Ukraine more than it does to Russia, obviously. So that's what we keep hearing. So it looks like that is true, as Merz did speak to Trump today. They said it was a confidential and constructive telephone conversation. So it looks like so far it went pretty good. Now moving on to Vice Grad 24, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk on the U.S. peace plan. Says, quote, all the decisions concerning Poland will be taken by Poles. Nothing about us without us. When it comes to peace, all the negotiations should include Ukraine. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So that appears to be the basis here coming out from Europe. Europe is very supportive of Ukraine. We know that. And pretty much every leader in Europe says no negotiations can be held about Ukraine without Ukraine, that Ukraine needs to be involved in these negotiations. That's why they're obviously coming out with their counter proposal, right? So good on Poland to be stepping up for Ukraine and backing them there. Here's another one, Savchenko Volodymyr. Peter Pavel is going to be the president of the Czech Republic. For the peace plan to be just, it must not punish the victim or overlook the crimes committed. And for it to last, it must guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty, ability to chart its own course, and decent future. Ukrainians and Europeans know Russia all too well and need credible assurances that this aggression will not return. That is why Ukraine and Europe must have a full say in any settlement. Okay, so he's backing Europe as well, saying that the Europeans need to be 100% involved in this peace process. I'm not sure why the U.S. seems to just sideline Europe all the time. Europe's been helping out Ukraine just as much as the United States has been. Okay, and they've given billions and billions of dollars over to Ukraine to help them out in this fight. I think they deserve to be there when we have these negotiations ongoing between Ukraine and Russia. Now, Vice Grad 24 breaking, the leaders of the Nordic Baltic 8 countries just held a meeting on the 28-point peace plan. Their message after the meeting was, "We continue to coordinate closely and give our full support to Ukraine and ensure a just and lasting peace." Okay, so the Nordic Baltic 8 countries coming together today, holding a meeting, and this was their message, that they stand firmly with Ukraine and support them for a just and lasting peace. Good statement coming out from these nations. Now, Max 25, Putin made it clear that the war in Ukraine will not end in the coming week, according to BBC News. He did not reject the proposals, but said they require detailed discussion. He is quite satisfied with the military scenario. Not all points of the plan look beneficial to the Kremlin. It contains neither specific mechanisms for non-expansion of NATO, one of Moscow's key demands, nor clear restrictions on Ukraine's offensive potential, which they also counted on. It is no less unclear how Moscow will react to the proposal to give up all territories outside Crimea, Donbass, as well as Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, especially given yesterday's demonstrative visit by Putin in a military uniform to the command post of the Zapad group. It should not be forgotten that many points, from the lifting of sanctions to restrictions on NATO expansion, require the agreement not only of Russia and Ukraine, but also the broad coalition of European countries. So I have to agree with this. We're not seeing any indication from the Russian side that they're willing to agree to this peace deal right now. The Kremlin, Vladimir Putin came out stating today that, they're open to discussions. They're open to, reaching a peaceful settlement. If not, the war is going to continue. But he did not say they were going to agree to this peace deal with the United States. And also, he mentioned that the Russians are making some major gains on the Eastern Front. So that's possibly indicating they don't really care for this peace plan. All they care about is continuing the war inside of Ukraine, because in his eyes, he believes that the Russians are winning. So that's another sign that the Russians don't care about this peace plan. They don't want peace inside of Ukraine. They want to continue the war. So I'm really curious to see what Trump's going to say about Russia, because Russia hasn't really mentioned a whole lot regarding this peace plan, right? Now, next, Trump thinks it's a good idea for Ukraine to give Russia territory the size of Luxembourg. According to AFP, Trump's peace plan proposes that Ukraine hand over 2,300 square kilometers to Russia, an area comparable to Luxembourg. Kyiv would have to give up nearly 5,000 square kilometers in the Donetsk Oblast, which is supposed to become a buffer zone, and another 45 square kilometers in Luhansk Oblast. In exchange, Moscow would withdraw its forces from parts of Kharkiv, 2,000 square kilometers, Dnipropetrovsk, 450 square kilometers, Sumy, 300 square kilometers, and Cherniv, 20 square kilometer regions. Reuters has also already published a map showing exactly which territories Ukraine is expected to cede under this plan. So look at how much Ukraine's going to have to give up versus Russia. 5,000 square kilometers in the Donetsk Oblast, and then another 45 in the Luhansk Oblast, versus Russia would have to give up somewhere around close to no more than 3,000, okay, less than that actually, like somewhere around 2,800 square kilometers. So they would have to give up much less than Ukraine's going to have to give up. And also, not only that, but in the Donetsk region, we know in these areas that the Russians don't control, there's major heavy fortifications that have been built. Also, the Zaporizhzhia region over here that could potentially protect Ukraine from any future attacks. So Ukraine would be putting themselves in a very vulnerable position if they were to do that. We're going to have to see if they give up the Donbass or not. That seems to be a major demand that Vladimir Putin will not bend on. So apparently the Russians will be withdrawing from some areas as well, like some of these areas of the Kharkiv region, Sumy region, I think also up here in the Cherniv region a little bit also. So let me know what you think about that, if you think this is fair for Ukraine or not. Share that in the comments. Now, Vice Grad 24 Politico reports that the Europeans are criticizing Witkoff's idea to use Europe's frozen Russian assets for a U.S.-led Ukraine reconstruction scheme. They fear the proposal could sabotage the EU negotiations to use the 140 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to fund a loan for Ukraine. So what we're hearing today is that the Europeans are not very happy with Steve Witkoff's proposal here, as obviously he had a lot to do with this peace plan As we know, he was working this out with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This is the special envoy, by the way, Steve Witkoff, that they're talking about. So in regards to this 140 billion in frozen Russian assets, we heard in the recent weeks that Europe is trying to access upwards of 300 billion of frozen Russian assets and get about 140 billion over to Ukraine. And then what would happen is Russia would pay reparations for damages caused in the war to Ukraine down the road, and that would repay that loan back to Europe. And Ukraine could receive this 140 billion right now. But due to this peace plan from Steve Witkoff, this could possibly sabotage that. So it looks like Europe is very upset with that. They don't like that idea at all. Now for next, Witkoff needs a psychiatrist. Europe stunned by the peace plan. European politicians are mocking the peace plan that Trump's special envoy Witkoff tried to present as a real diplomatic proposal. According to Politico, some European officials even said outright that Witkoff needs a psychiatrist. Okay, so there you go. You can clearly see that the Europeans do not like Steve Witkoff. I've seen a lot of you guys even in the comments that claim that Steve Witkoff doesn't know what he's doing and whatnot. So let me know what you think about him. He's a special envoy from the Trump administration. He's tasked with negotiating with Russia. What I think is strange is that we had reports in the last month or two that when he went to go meet with Vladimir Putin a couple months back, he was supposed to be there for only like 20 minutes or something, and he was actually there for 5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin. That's probably what they were doing, was discussing ways to benefit Russia with this peace plan, is what I'm thinking, but you guys can let me know what you think. And then Trump came out during a speech while he was in Israel a couple weeks back, and he was stating that he doesn't know why Steve Witkoff was in there so long, and there was also reports that Steve Witkoff was supposed to have a special aide show up in the room with him to take notes, and that aide was not even there. So it was literally just Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin that were negotiating. So interesting information. Let me know if you like Steve Witkoff here to be negotiating on behalf of Ukraine and Russia and trying to set up this peace proposal. You can clearly see that in some ways he may not know what he's doing, and also a lot of this proposal really benefits Russia. Finally, from Witkoff, Russia has launched over 112,000 shaheeds at Ukraine during the war, according to Sersky. This is the commander of Ukraine's armed forces. It says here the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine noted that the main targets of these drones were residential buildings and civilian infrastructure, which led to the deaths of peaceful residents, including children. Okay, so the reason why I brought this up is obviously an update coming from the commander of Ukraine's military, claiming that 112,000 Shahed drones have attacked Ukraine throughout the duration of this war. Just think about those numbers for a minute. That's a lot of drones going into Ukraine throughout the last almost 4 years now. And on top of that, I'm tying this into the video because there's a part of the peace plan that talks about how everybody's going to get amnesty, okay? That includes everybody on the Ukrainian side and the Russian side. And think about all the war crimes that have been created just from the Russian side alone, where they've attacked innocent civilians inside of Ukraine. How many people have lost their lives? I don't even know the number. It's probably in the thousands, I'm pretty sure. Innocent people being killed in these drone and missile attacks, just like what was reported just a couple days ago in Territorial with that missile that slammed into a residential apartment building, killing around 30 people and injuring almost 100 others, including many different children. Yet we have this peace proposal that's going to write all of that off and basically force Ukraine to no longer pursue war crimes against Russia in the future. That is just, to me, is absolutely insane. Coming from the United States being one of the biggest countries in the world and the leader of the free world, I guess is what people want to say or call it. And yet we have this peace plan that will just completely eliminate all that and protect Russia. So crazy what we're seeing happening over here, guys. Just want to give you some updates regarding this peace plan between Ukraine and Russia, and the fact that we do have Europe and Ukraine actively working on a counter proposal right now. So guys, I'll continue to follow this story and give you some more updates later on down the road. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in for today's update on November 21st, 2025. Hope y'all have a great night out there. Thanks so much. Let me know what you think about all these details down below in the comment section. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.